You're back. Everyone's back. Bladders have been relieved, food has been consumed. Thank you so much for joining us. And as they exit the stage, I do just want to give a shout out and a thank you to Faisal, Lee, Maria, and also Jorge. A lot of what we do in these conferences is we get in our heads and we talk about concepts. We're so good at getting academic. But what these four people just did takes an extra level of guts, because they're not talking about concepts and ideas. They are talking about their pain. You all just walked in and saw four people opening up right before you their scar tissue, their lived experiences in countries where there is very little liberty left. So I just want to thank them for being vulnerable with us and having a really great conversation. Thank you. Thank you. Also, someone lost a black iPad. I was waiting till someone lost electronics. Someone lost a black iPad. So if you have found a black iPad, please return it to the speaker tent, and that is located next door. Also, I don't know if you all have truly explored the expo hall. Raise your hand if you've walked through the expo hall. All right, now raise your hand if y'all got your drink tickets at the expo hall. Sorry, y'all at home, but we got some drink tickets here. There will be a lot of drinking, dancing, music coming up later today. So make sure that you explore all the tables, all the kiosks, and then get your drink tickets at the end. And now, our next speaker, talk about a badass. This is a woman you show up for. This is a woman that if you need to go to the restroom, you hold it. This is not the one that you skip out on. This woman is a true friend of liberty. She's the president of People for Liberty. And of course, she was the 2020 Libertarian Party nominee for the President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Jo Jorgensen. Thank you.
Can I hire you to go around the country with me? I appreciate that so much. By the way, could I get the handheld mic? Would that be a problem? So I am so happy to talk to you today. And what I find a bit ironic is many of you are students. I am a teacher, a college lecturer, and here it's Saturday, and you are here sitting in the audience watching me. Thank you so much. So now that we got that out of the way, I am so happy to be here because while I do teach psychology at Clemson University, I've had so many people ask me, what do your students think of your politics? What do they say? And I explain to them, I'm not a liberal. I do not think that I should use tuition money to tell them my personal beliefs. So, in fact, one of the first times a student had found out about me, this was maybe 12 years ago, shortly after I started teaching, he said, did you run for vice president? He said, I Googled your name to see what your office number was so I could go over your test, and up comes a Wikipedia page. I said, yep, that's me. So I'm so excited to be here. The way I look at it, though, is while I can't really talk about politics to my students, I figure I can talk psychology to you. So you are going to get the best of both worlds. You're going to get my knowledge from both in the classroom, although I no pop quizzes, I'll try not to make it sound too much like a lecture. And you're going to get my experience running for office. So, and by the way, I love both fields very much. So one of the classes that I've taught and a section that I teach, and let me circle back to the, yes, we are going to be talking about opt-in marketing, opt-in for our lives, and we're going to be talking about modernizing the message. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of combine my psychological background with my political background. So one thing that I teach in the cognitive section of psychology, and by the way, again, hate to turn this into too much of a lecture, but cognition, or the study of cognitive psychology, is the study of how we acquire knowledge, how we acquire and retain knowledge. Now, there are two things that we know from extensive research, which is one, We grasp concrete information easier. And secondly, we also remember concrete information longer. This means in getting our message out there, which absolutely needs to be modernized. To modernize our message, we need to use what we know about science. So we need to use concrete terms when selling freedom. And when I first started out in my, I hate to say it, a political career, let's say my candidate career, I ran for House, in this U.S. House in 1992. And I would go around and talk to voters. And they would ask me, what are your issues? What's your position? And I would say, I'm for freedom. And at first, I didn't quite pay attention. I was too excited about the fact that I was running for office. But after a while, I began to notice that when I would say, I'm for freedom, their eyes would glaze over. And some of them would even say, we're already the freest country in the world. We're already free. Now, I do realize I am saying this at the Freer Future Fest. I do realize that, okay? But that's the point, is we're all here because we love freedom. We love the abstract idea of freedom. We want to live our lives free. We want to have liberty. That's us. If we're going to modernize our message and market it out there, we have to look at what they want, not what we want. We want freedom. They all say, we already got it. So we really need to talk in more concrete terms when talking to them. Again, not amongst ourselves, when talking to voters. And this goes for all abstract words. Again, the brain cannot handle, it's just how we're built. It's how our brains are wired. Our brains cannot handle abstract words as well as concrete. So all the words out there that we keep hearing, such as power, you know, by golly, I've never seen a voters poll out there where the top 10 issues was, yes, I want power. Or in the top 20 or even the top 50. Instead, it's items like education, healthcare, the economy, jobs, whatever. Keep in mind, with effective selling, and that's what we're doing, like it or not. And by the way, my first career after I received my MBA was I sold computers for IBM. And I look at selling as a very honorable and noble career if you do it honestly and if you are serving the people that you are selling to. Because think about it, you are a problem solver. You are making their lives better. And that's what we need to do, is make their lives better. So with effective selling, we've got to address their issues, not our issues. Imagine you decide you want to buy a new car. You walk into a showroom and the guy says, you know, great, I'm glad you came here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the power to get a new car. No, what the salesman is going to say is, oh, what do you want? Do you want, you want to look cool in a convertible? Or do you want a minivan to drive your kids around with their hockey sticks and soccer balls? Or do you want both? And then he puts you in the convertible and says, you look awesome in that convertible. He doesn't explain that he's selling the car because what's in it for him is a new vacation or a new car for him. Voters are looking for a better life, an improved economy, education, better education, education that they control, not the freedom to go out and get something or the power to go out and get something. So what we need to do is walk up to people and say, here, have a seat in my education plan. You look great in it. And by the way, it's exactly what you're looking for. We need to stop being ideological and philosophical. And I'm going to be the first one to say I was the guiltiest party. For 16 years after joining the movement, I went around telling people I wanted freedom and I wanted liberty. And I talked philosophy. And That's not what voters are looking for. Democrats and Republicans don't spend all their time explaining philosophy. Now, yes, those discussions go on. Yes, Republicans and Democrats do have their philosophy, but they talk about it in the back rooms, and it's secondary, tertiary. It's not their main message. So we've got to realize that in the pursuit of liberty, in the pursuit of freedom, we can't talk about what excites us. We got to talk about what excites them. So let's talk a little more about the opt-in thing. Back to psychology. People like choices. There's something, and I had to throw in some kind of psychological term here. There's a term called reactance theory, which says that people react negatively when their choices are taken away. It's kind of like reverse psychology. You may have heard of that term. Anybody, now this is before your time. When you look at the students in the mid-50s who were just trying to enjoy their music, up pops the Parents Music Resource Center in 1985. Anybody familiar with them? Yes. It was run by the wives of Washington. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to supposedly give parents better control over their children's music, as though parents have no control over their kids anyway. And you know what? If parents don't have control over their kids, Tipper Gore certainly isn't going to give that power. But anyway, they went out and they said, okay, we don't like this dirty language. We don't like the sex and violence. So what we're going to do is and they talked about different options. One of the things that, or what they ended up doing was they ended up putting little stickers on the CDs that warned you of this stuff that if you're a teenager, you're not supposed to listen to. Okay, so you as a teenager, what are you going to do when you have the choice between buying a CD that says, this is great for you to listen to, or one that says, nope, not allowed? You're going to want the other CD. And many people have pointed out that, yes, it actually increased sales. In fact, some people have said that Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, who's one of the people on the other side, they said, perhaps he was crazy like a fox, and this was his intent all along. No, don't put stickers on my CDs that tells kids they're not supposed to read them. So humans are motivated to gain and keep their choices. If our choices are taken away from us, if our freedom is taken away from us, it makes us want to reclaim it. And by the way, sometimes a result when we don't get our freedom is aggression, and we've seen that going around in the world. Unfortunately, while we who love freedom, who love liberty, while we believe in the opt-in option, where you decide what to opt in, the government doesn't work that way. In fact, the government doesn't even use the worst option, which is opt out. They use nothing. They say you have no choice, and here you go. And unfortunately, it's really not helping our society. I've got a friend who, during the height of the mask season, she and her dad, by the way, is from Texas. I lived in Texas for 8 years. I understand the Texas spirit. I understand the spirit of people who love freedom, love liberty. And they were going to go into a restaurant, and the hostess said, you've got to wear a mask. And he threw a fit and said, I'm not going to wear a mask. And my friend was so embarrassed. She was like, I can't believe my dad put on a scene. Like, my dad she just thought he was so awful. And I said, but look, I've met your dad. He's a really nice guy. I can't imagine him doing that. Think about this. If there were choices, if it were like no shirt, no shoes, no service, okay, fine. I don't want to wear a shirt, so I won't go to that restaurant. I'll go to that restaurant that allows me to go without a shirt. He would have been fine wearing a mask. But the problem is he's not even given the opt-out option, let alone the opt-in. So I have three big concerns for liberty and freedom in our country. First of all, that liberty is being eroded for the general good. Secondly, that liberty is now up for a vote. And last, that liberty is for sale. So first of all, let's look at it being eroded for the general good. We don't get to opt in on many things. And we thought it was bad before. Now look at with masks and vaccines. In many cases, we can't opt in. In fact, we can't even opt out. And what's scary is this is what the Constitution was specifically written for. The Constitution was written to give us our individual freedoms. Now, some people say, well, but that seems reasonable to wear a mask. That seems reasonable to not spread a disease. But the thing is it's the reasonable that we need to be protected from. It's the reasonable that the Constitution protects us from. Unreasonable people, we already have protection against them. We've got criminal court, civil court. We can write contracts. So that's handled. It's the reasonable people who say it's reasonable to wear a mask, it's reasonable to get vaccinated, it's reasonable to put nutrition labeling on packages. And, if you think about it, if you frame it a little differently, I know a lot of people say, well, I guess it's nice to have nutrition labeling when I go to the store. I can look and see which one has more carbs and proteins. How harmless is that? But think about the opposite. What that means is it is illegal for somebody to sell you something without nutrition labeling if you don't care or you don't want it. In fact, with restaurants around the country, they had where you had to label on major chains, you had to label nutrition information, including calories. What if you just want to go out and celebrate? What if you eat very healthy during the rest of the week and you just want to go out and celebrate and not look at calories that day? The government is telling you you can't do it. So something that might sound reasonable to give you information can be very unreasonable for some people. The second thing I'm concerned about is that now liberty is up for a vote. Our freedom is up for a vote. A lot of people have asked me, why do you think our country is so divisive? Is it because we're so corrupt? Because we keep hearing about the corruption in Washington. I don't think that's it. A lot of people don't realize back in the 1930s and 40s, Congress was very corrupt, hugely corrupt. Some people would argue a lot more corrupt than they are today. And yet people weren't divided. We weren't divisive. Why is that? Because not everything went through government. Back then, people were just like, okay, fine, you guys go be corrupt. Meanwhile, I'll just live my life. I will opt into the school that I want to. I'll opt into the kind of healthcare I want. I'll opt into my retirement. But now everything goes through government. And to look at it at a local level or at back to a concrete level, let's say you want prayer in your school, or you don't want masks, or you want vaccines, or you want school uniforms, or you want PE class, or you don't want PE class, you want art, whatever. Let's use prayer as an example. You want prayer in your class, in your kid's school, and your neighbors don't. What you have to do right now is you and your neighbor have to battle it out. By the way, talk about civility, talk about your dad not being able to go to any restaurant without a mask and throwing a fit. So you and your neighbor have to battle it out, where you each pick your own candidate, you donate money, you get all your friends to vote for that, you put out yard signs, and then on election day, you and your neighbor vote. And guess what? One of you is going to win and one of you is going to lose. And you're under a supposedly one-size-fits-all system that doesn't fit all. How are you supposed to be civil like that? So now politics has become a battleground. Again, you can't opt into the school you want that has prayer. You can't opt into the school in many places that don't require vaccines or don't require masks. pretty soon it's going to be, okay, let's all have a national vote. Are we going to be steak eaters or are we all going to be vegetarians? The government has gotten out of control with this. And you know, some people said, yeah, but if the government doesn't do it, it won't get done. Well, first of all, my, let's say, philosophical answer is it shouldn't be against the law to be stupid. But the practical answer is, yes, it does get done. For instance, just recently looking back, Walmart had requirements that every customer, every employee, every vendor, anybody who steps into the store has to wear a mask. There were other players as well, Kohl's and so forth, before the government had such a mandate. So it was getting done. Now, many of you are young. You don't remember what it was like. I remember when there was smoking on airplanes. In fact, that's why it actually says no smoking, because that used to be an option and is still an option in some places. And then Northwest Airlines decided that they would have no smoking flight for all of their flights. And so that way, if you wanted to opt in to no smoking, you could fly Northwest. If you wanted to smoke, you could opt into a different airline. And then the government came along and passed a law that there was no smoking. Now, notice, it was already being offered by the free market. The free market was already getting something done that many people say won't get done without the government doing it for us. Now, go back even further. Child labor laws. So many people say, oh, it's so good we've got the government. Without the government, we'd still have 6-year-olds working in factories. No. Once again, it was society that changed first. People could afford to not send their kids to school to work. And then what happened is government said, okay, let's outlaw child labor. The government wasn't about to outlaw child labor when, no family in their county could, or their state could afford to live without child labor. Now, again, I'm not saying it's good. What I'm saying is it was society that changed for the better on its own, people demanding it on their own without the government. So the third one, that our liberty, our freedoms are up for a sale. If anybody followed the Obamacare thing, the Democrats passed a law that requires us to purchase stuff, requires us to buy stuff. Now, no matter that that was against the Constitution, they passed it anyway. Now, the most frightening thing is it doesn't even address health care. It doesn't even address getting care directly to somebody or making it cheaper. In fact, it does the opposite. What does Obamacare address? It addresses insurance. It simply addresses insurance. And guess who one of the big proponents was? Guess who one of the big donors was to the movement? Insurance companies. So now we've got our liberty up for a vote. Instead of us getting to decide, instead of the free market giving us choices, we've got people giving money to the government, which, by the way, puts the power in their hands and not ours to make our own choices. The Constitution was not written to enable. It was written to limit. In fact, if you think about it, our Constitution is kind of an oxymoron. It's written by government to limit itself. And that's what makes it so different from other countries. Our conception of liberty is much different than others. We realize that government is a different kind of entity, that it is inherently dangerous. In other countries, government has the potential to be dangerous based on what it does. Outside of America, government can earn people's trust. We, however, understand that the government does not give us the opt-in option. And we need to explain that in terms of people. And especially now, everybody has had spam email. Let's get back to the concrete. Let's get back to modernizing our message. Again, and part of this isn't finger pointing. If it is any finger pointing, it's finger pointing at me because that is what I did for 16 years. So let's put it in terms that affect people's everyday life. I don't know anybody who likes spam. I'm sure there's somebody out there. That's the wonderful thing about our country is we've got all types. We've got a wide variety of people. So most people don't like spam. They would at least like to opt out, although it would be much better, most people think it's much better to opt in. How about having an opt-in government? It's been pointed out that America is both a nation and an idea. The other countries who say they are, the only countries that are based on an idea, such a core idea, are based on religious ideas. Ours stands alone in that the Constitution is devoted to the rights of the individual. And we've got to show people how we can achieve what they're looking for. So for education, this is a great opportunity for us to go out. And let me point out the differences that I have seen. So I'm not sure if you realize this, but I was the 1996 vice presidential nominee. And I would go around telling people, now keep in mind, education is a local issue, not a national issue. So presidents shouldn't be involved with education at all. However, we do have the Department of Education. So I was going around saying how we need to get rid of it, turn the power back over to teachers, parents, and students. And I would ask parents, but what we have is a government-run monopoly. You know, do you like monopolies? And parents would be like, oh, but I like my school. And I said, yeah, but you realize you're not getting much choice. And they would say, well, but that's okay, because I like the choices they're making. And I really, it just fell on deaf ears. And here we get back to marketing and marketing it as basically selling to sell what the people are looking for. In the 90s, they weren't looking at education because they liked what they were being given. Again, we are all here because we love freedom and liberty for its sake, regardless of how it turns out. That's not the average person. The average person said, I'm happy with my school district, but you know, thanks for the chit chat. Now look at where we've gotten. I mean, I gotta admit, I can succumb to being, I told you so. I would love to go back to the 1990s and tell some of those parents, I told you so. You said, no problem with the government-run monopoly. Look at where it's gotten us. A supposed one-size-fits-all that doesn't fit all. And it's got politicians who have the nerve to tell them how appalling that parents think that they have the right to say what schools should teach. You know, never mind that it's their own children. And the problem, of course, goes beyond education. If we look at what Biden is presenting right now, multi-trillion-dollar, and notice the lie that he's saying, which is, oh, it doesn't affect people making under $400,000 a year. Here's the thing. If you're making $400,000 a year, under our system, you've pretty much got two choices. You can give your money to the government, or you can buy stuff. You can buy more clothing, buy a new car, go out to restaurants, take a nicer vacation, renovate your kitchen. Apparently that's what everybody's doing these days. Everybody's been tired after being cooped up in the pandemic. They want different surroundings. So there's been a lot of remodeling going on. So you can spend that money now. You know, and they say, well, if you make $400,000, you don't need it. Okay, people with $400,000, they don't put it in a hole in their backyard. They spend it. And if they spend it on new kitchens, restaurant dinners, and so forth, that money is going directly to the person, as opposed to giving it to the government, which has overhead. Now, it'd be bad enough if we just lost money through overhead. That would be bad enough. And that'd be enough to say, no, this isn't a good system. But it's worse. When we spend the money, no matter how much you make, whether it's $40,000 or $400,000, when we spend the money, we are deciding who gets the money. if this contractor or this restaurant owner or this server or this clothing store can offer you better services, a better price, better quality over this one, hey, let's support that one. And let's encourage, let's put the money where it should go and let those people be the winners, as opposed to giving the money to the government and let them decide who's going to be the winners. Because you know what? The government's not trying to figure out who's serving us best. The government is trying to figure out who serves them best. It's Congress people, it's senators who are looking at who gives them the campaign contributions so that they can put the money where it does themselves best. Back to American freedom. American freedom is celebrated by people everywhere in the abstract, which is why we need to do a job selling it concretely. Notice the recent Cuban protests. Marchers carried American flags throughout the streets. And they weren't displaying the flag saying, we all want to become Americans. They were flying the flags as a symbol of liberty and freedom, because that's what America is, a symbol of liberty and freedom, and we need to keep it that way. Thanks so much.